Hello guys, gals, non-binary pals, and waterfowls. It's me, Big Mike, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Coffee with Big Mike, the series where I sit down for a chat with some rather interesting and amazing people over a nice cup of coffee. As you may know, I am now affiliated with Poggers, the amazing popsicle flavored energy drink mix. Poggers is an amazing drink that is designed to keep you focused and going. It comes in two different flavors, Pog Pop and Cream Dream. So if you're looking for that pick-me-up, be sure to give Poggers a go. And if you use the link in the description and the promo code DuckDaddy, you can save 10% and help my channel. That's 2 ducks with 1 stone. Now fam, this is a special episode. So unlike on previous installments of Coffee with Big Mike, this episode will focus on talking about a specific topic, namely the Kevin Smith film, Clerks 3. So major spoilers ahead. So if you haven't seen it yet, go check it out and then come back to this video. And now, with all of that out of the way, joining me is my good university buddy and damn good brother, Dr. Nick.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dr. Nick.
Good to see you, Mike.
It's a pleasure to see you as
old
well.
friend.
How's it been, bro?
It's been an interesting 2 years. And I think it's always interesting anytime I'm on a podcast, I'm here to talk about movies. I think the last podcast I was on was at the height of the pandemic, and we were talking about how movies really were going to do during COVID era and what that was going to look like. And so here we are now. Obviously, the pandemic's still very real, but the movie business has rebounded. I guess for your guests, just for some context here, I hold a Ph.D. where I would say I'm a scholar of cinema studies, and I taught at a school in the American Midwest at their film school for 4 years before eventually moving on. So movies are very much a big part of my life, and one of the reasons I immediately said yes to doing this with you, I know you probably want to pause and wait, is I really wouldn't have appreciated Kevin Smith if I didn't meet you in college, but that's probably, like I just said, a story for a little later. But I'm really glad to see you here today. It's my 10-year anniversary with my girlfriend. We've been together 10 years today, and I'm here with my cat who watches probably every movie with me. So I'm ready to talk about movies. I'm ready to talk about Kevin Smith. Just ready to have fun.
So first, just let me say, I'm a little disappointed, Nick. I thought I was going to be taking your podcast V card, but it's okay.
No, I appreciate that.
But also, congratulations on your anniversary, man. 10 years, that is
Thank
something
you.
special, bro. That is absolutely something special.
I was just going to say, I think we've been together almost as long as you and your wife have been together. It's not far behind.
We're like 1 year behind you guys. So
Yeah, something like that.
So in a couple of days, actually, we've been together for about 10 years, but in a couple of months, our marriage anniversary will be 9 years. So, I think so. Yeah, I think we're just about the same time. Before we jump too much further into this, I have a fan, and she's really, really big on knowing what kind of beverage we'll be drinking during the course of this podcast. I myself will be drinking a lovely cup of coffee called Kapal Api. You can kind of call it the Folgers of Indonesia. Are you drinking anything, Dr. Nick?
It's a little late here in the U.S. at the time of this recording, so Aquafina for me. I know they're not your sponsor yet.
Man, if I could get them to sponsor me, bro, all of my money problems go poof out the window.
You'd probably have 3 or 4 podcasts if you had them sponsoring you.
We would milk that cow. We would milk that cow until she runs dry, baby. Whew. You introduced yourself a bit, and you talked about how we met in university when we were in college. Do you remember how we met?
I think I could be so wrong on this. I think we met outside our dorm one very misty morning. I think I'd kind of seen you around with this group unofficially called the Breakfast Club. But I don't remember the day we really started talking. We lived in the same dorm, right? Like, weren't you an RA?
That's right. I was, and oh boy, that's a whole other story we're gonna get to later. But yeah, kind of interesting situation. So I'm a bit of a spiritual person. Well, maybe that's putting it lightly, but I try to keep my religious beliefs separate from my content creation. But for the sake of this
Sure.
story, I'll share a bit. So I'm a bit of a spiritual person, and I was outside walking to breakfast at the cafeteria one very foggy, very misty morning, and there's this girl. She's walking in front of me, and just for context, I'm 22, 23 years old at the time. So Big Mike is a super horn dog. Big Mike could look at a screen door, and Big Mike is ready to go. But there's this nice thick mama just walking in front of me, and she's wearing these booty shorts, and I'm getting mesmerized. And then all of a sudden, I see Dr. Nick walking up beside me. Now, just for context, Dr. Nick he had kind of would you call it a fro?
It was kind of a long-haired fro thing. Yeah, it was kind of hard to typify,
Yeah.
I guess. And my memory's not so great on it now. I only got the pictures to go by. But yeah, it was like a long-haired fro. Some people called it the Jew fro at the time. I don't think they call it that anymore.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that word 'cause I don't know if it's offensive or not. I don't know if it's offensive or not. But he was wearing this brown like kind of shaggy hoodie, like a wooden rosary, necklace. He had sandals. So he looked like your stereotypical picture of Jesus, and I'm like, and he just kind of just appeared out of nowhere, or it looked like he did because of the mist and the fog, and I was like, holy shit, is this Jesus? And I'm like, uh-oh, this ain't good, because, I'm just looking at mama with her big booty bouncing all over the place, and then this could be Jesus right beside me. But it wasn't Jesus after all. It's my buddy Nick, and I didn't find Jesus that day, but I did find a very good friend of mine, someone I consider to be a good brother, and we met. We met that day. We didn't really kind of hit it off that day, but we did. We did eventually meet, and Nick would join my group that's known as the Breakfast Club, and we will call it the Breakfast Club because we would meet for breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the cafeteria, and we would chat. We would talk about different things. Sometimes we would hang out in elevators just for fun.
Yeah.
Very, very fun times, I would say. But speaking of
Probably.
sorry, please.
I was gonna say I'm probably cheating by getting ahead, but one of my favorite memories is that time you had like a sleeping bag, and you were sleeping on the floor of the elevator, and we would just wait for people to open the door. And this woman, it looks like she was there visiting her daughter or something, and then you you said you looked up like someone woke you up, and you said, "Turn that damn light off." You said, "Turn that damn light off," and the woman was just so shocked. She just walked away, like she left the dorm.
Oh, oh, that was. Whew. I see. That was the best part. Was just the reactions of the people, man. So I'm a huge
Yeah.
fan of guerrilla comedy, like stuff like Jackass, Tom Green. So that was a really big thing for me. I remember that one.
Oh, you remembered that one? There was probably some more we could probably talk about that we probably shouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Absolutely, absolutely. Now there's one thing I wanted to ask you though. There's one thing I wanted to ask, or there's one thing I wanted to tell you, I should say, and that's my favorite Nick. Oh, I fucked up. Okay, I'm gonna have to cut that out. Uh, that was my biggest fear going into this, man. That was my biggest fear going into this. That I was gonna fuck up and say your name, bro.
can you cut it out?
Oh, I can. Yeah, this is not
Okay.
live. This is not live.
All right.
But I can
Okay.
cut it out. So yeah. So one thing I wanted to talk about, or wanted to bring up with Dr. Nick. Now, Big Mike is straight edge now. I don't smoke. I don't drink. It comes with the punk lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
But back in university, and I'll get to this later on because my story kind of ties in a bit with the story of this movie and the story, something that is similar to what Kevin Smith went through. But long story short, I was going through a lot of stuff, and partying for me was a good way to blow off steam, to take the load off my shoulders, so to speak. And so, I used to get shit faced a couple times a week. I don't think I wouldn't consider myself an alcoholic, or I wasn't a pothead or anything like that. But I enjoyed it. So there was this one time, one Friday night. I can't remember. Was it Cool in the Gang? Was it?
No, no, no. First of all, do you remember what you drank?
Oh my. Okay. So I was drinking OG Four Loco, and then I had
Four Locos and what else? Do you remember the
King
other one?
Cobra. It was
It
either
was a
King.
King
It was
Cobra.
either King Cobra or Old
Yep.
English High Gravity. One of the two.
Oh, it was the King Cobra. I
And
remember because an unnamed associate of ours said that Nick, you gotta help me. He had Four Loco and a King Cobra. That's exactly what he said. We'll just call him Dan the Man.
oh yeah, Dan the Man. Whew.
Yeah.
Dan the Man. Yeah, it was a miracle. It was a miracle I didn't get in trouble that night, bro. But so it was. So Nick had went to this concert, and I was talking to my mom about it because my mom's a huge fan of that genre of music. My mom wanted to come too, but she couldn't make it because school's a bit far away. And I was talking to Nick, and I guarantee I probably asked Nick that question like 10 times that night. Um,
Well, it started off. First of all, it was Casey and the Sunshine Band, and it's interesting you mentioned that because I took my mom to see it. She wanted to go. If I don't know if they do this anymore, but tickets for students were like dirt cheap. So it was $5 a ticket, and I got one for her, one for a friend, one for my sister, and one for me. I wasn't really into that stuff, but I walked away a bit of a fan. But anyway, when I walked my mom out of the show and we parted ways, I walked onto campus, happened to see you, saw Dan the Man. Same thing I just told you. He said, "Man, you got to help us out." And you looked at me and you said, "Where you been all night, man?" And I said, "I just, I was over there at the concert." And you were like, "Who was it?" And I said, "Casey and the Sunshine Band." You were like, "Oh, how was it?" And I said, "Yeah, man, it was good. My mom enjoyed it." So then we walked over to Waffle House. I don't know if you remember this part because you were pretty far gone. We sat there, we ate some food. It was me, you, Dan, someone else. I want to say it was Liana, but I don't remember. But you got a refill on your drink. You just said, "You never told me how Casey and the Sunshine Band was." And I said, "Yeah, man, it was pretty good." So we eat our dinner, and I'm helping you cross the train tracks back onto campus. And I remember you burped really loud and then said, "How was Casey and the Sunshine Band?" So I told you again, "Yeah, man, it was really good." Walk you all the way back to the dorm. You're struggling to kind of get up the stairs, so we take the elevator. As we're just kind of waiting in quiet, you just look at me like very serious. It's very clear you're not trying to mess with me. You go, "Been all night," and I said, "I took my mom to see Casey and the Sunshine Band." You said, "Man, how was that?" I said, "It was good, Mike." So we finally get upstairs. I finally let you in. Before the night's over, you go, "You never told me how Casey and the Sunshine Band was." I said, and by then I think I quit answering. But yeah, the next morning, I think at breakfast, or maybe it was Monday, I told you that. And I think it took you a second to believe me, but oh,
I actually, I think at first it took me a bit, but then, you've never drunk any alcohol before, right? You never touched the stuff. So kind of how it works, at least for some people, or at least how it works for me. I can remember everything that happens when I'm drunk. Now sometimes, like in that night, it'll take some time for it to come back to me, but I can remember everything. Or sometimes I can wake up and I'll remember everything. And after that point, it hit me that I had asked you that a couple times. After you'd brought it up that day at lunch or breakfast, that I'd asked you several times. And so now, every time I see Nick or every time I talk to Nick, that's kind of our running gag. So, how was Casey and the Sunshine Band, Nick?
you know what, man? It's phenomenal. I've had about 12 years to think about it, and it gets better with age.
I will say though, I did stop drinking alcohol in 2013, but that night was my last time drinking Four Loco. Uh,
I
Fuck
think it
that.
was it was it was the last time drinking before Loco for a lot of people, right? Because that's when they It's when they took away. I remember it was a big deal that they were going to kill off whatever it originally was, right? Like it was alcohol and something else.
It was like that.
I'm misremembering.
I forget the exact terms. It was that I think something for tea, but it's that same shit they put in the energy drinks, like Monster
Yeah.
and stuff. Um,
Mm.
wh- I'm honest. I couldn't even tell you why I even drunk it, Nick, because it's like it. On the one hand, it had a nasty taste to it, but on the other hand, it always now just Four Loco, not any other type of alcohol, but it always made my stomach feel like it was in tug of war because you have uppers, you have downers, and whew. But we used to call it blackout in a can for very good reason.
Blackout in the can.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. You mentioned being straight edge. Yeah, I've never touched a cigarette, booze, drugs, never done any of that stuff. So, but I am interested in people's experiences with that. It's kind of interesting hearing it come from someone else and what it's like, because I literally can only imagine.
No, I mentioned earlier, yeah, or you brought up earlier that you're not just a fan of movies, but in fact you have a Ph.D. in movies. And not only that, have you studied it from an academic perspective, but you've worked on a couple of films before, right?
Yes, yeah. On one with you actually, which got us into a lot of trouble at the time, and uh, I worked on oh gosh, several films, and the most recent one I did is an upcoming documentary. It's the unofficial title, but I'm 90% certain this is the title they're sticking with. It's a documentary called Flat State, and I think that was probably the biggest production I'd ever worked on. For the most part, I had done a lot of student productions, a lot of student films and stuff like that. But it's by British director Stephen Crompton, and he's also a good friend of mine. And the title of the documentary, if I haven't mentioned it already, is called Flat State, and it studies and follows a group of people who believe the Earth is flat. I don't like to say flat earthers because in a way it is dismissive. Not that I believe the Earth is flat, but it's a sociological documentary following these people, following their journey, asking them how they honestly believe that the Earth is flat. It's called Flat State because it takes place in Ohio. It follows a group of people in Cleveland, Ohio, uh, over the course of several years, actually. It's in post production currently. I moved away from that area around the time filming wrapped for good. And I was the production assistant, but I also helped with the lighting. I also helped with the driving. I helped with pretty much all the dramatizations and reenactments. So heavily involved. I love that aspect of the filmmaking practice because that actually teaches you why so few people make it. Not to say they don't have what it takes, but a lot of people, Mike, don't. It's not that they don't love movies. It's not that they don't love the business, but they don't love the hours. Um, this is a line of work where one wrong thing can send the director or the producer or whoever in a downward spiral, and that just makes it a bad time for everybody. Not to say Steven was ever like that, because he's not. It's real when you're there, like real boots on the ground work. When you have to make sure that the talent is there on time, that everybody is happy, that the equipment works properly, that everybody has what they need, that the documentation and the paperwork is signed. And you see, this is not only a real business, a real practice, but a very tough one.
Actually, I had no idea you actually worked on a documentary. Now, you'd
Hmm.
also worked on more, or have you only done documentaries, or have you also worked on more, I guess, I don't want to say drama, because I feel like that kind of gives the wrong impression, but I guess more, what's the appropriate word to use here?
Well, no, I would say most of the projects I've been involved with were documentary. Now, when I did drama work is when I was involved in theater, which is a line of work I guess you could say I'm no longer really affiliated with. I have done a lot of radio work, but I've also since moved on from that. I'm specifically either in the classroom or behind the camera now.
I would never compare the project we worked on to anything you've worked on since then. So really really different ball game. But what differences, or what are some major differences between, or what are some major differences are there between working on, say, a a documentary, I guess a more or like a comedy or an action or a romance movie?
Well, I haven't worked at all really with romance or anything like that, but I will say I think people are actually easier to deal with when they're being themselves. Specifically, when I'm talking about documentary work, I mean, these are the people who are, for the most part, I would say, very happy to talk about themselves, even if they're describing something tragic that happened to them, something that happened to them maybe in their childhood, because it's just like what most psychologists have discovered, that most people enjoy talking about themselves. Completely fine. When you're talking about people making an action film, making a comedy film, making a romance or horror film, you have to understand the people on camera, this is their job. If this project does not wrap successfully, that's a paycheck they might lose out on. And so sometimes, I'm not putting down actors because I used to act, and it's a craft I admire wholeheartedly. But for them, it is a job. Even if it is a job they take very seriously and are very passionate about, at the end of the day, it is a job. And so you can't always have that connection that you would have, say, with your subjects for a documentary. I'm very interested in hearing about people and their experiences that they bring. They're usually very enthusiastic to talk about that under a documentary. Whereas something like action or comedy, I mean, the people in front of the camera can be very detached from it, you know. Could be just another paycheck, or it could just be something satisfying their contracts until they get, that next sweet deal that they want. And again, I'm not saying that of all actors because I don't believe that's true. But in a way, because actors are so talented in covering that side of themselves up, you don't always really know who you're working with. So that's why I actually prefer documentary work, because it's stories by people, about people, and about the world we live in, whether you agree with that view of the world or not.
Those are some very good points to bring up. That's actually one of the reasons why I really enjoy doing Coffee with Big Mike. Because I get to meet people, I get to talk to them, I get to get their perspectives on different aspects, on life, on content creation, on gaming. It's something. It's just very enlightening, and I always find that I walk away from the situation with more than what I came in with. And so it's something
Yeah.
I really enjoy. And it's, even though this isn't a documentary per se, it's kind of similar in that regard.
Well, money is a topic about what we're going to talk about today. I don't want to get too ahead of it, but money is definitely a part of the Clerks 3 story, all the way up to how the film was finished and we got the product that we got. But again, I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Now, I don't know, I can't remember if I ever told you about this before, but when I was in high school, I shot a documentary, and it was a complete and utter failure. And
Okay.
for me, making documentaries, and I guess it just depends on the nature of your documentary as well. Um, for me, my biggest fault was I forgot to take into consideration that people, yeah, being in front of a camera will change people. And my idea was a documentary was to film an art class, because at the time in high school I had an art class with a lot of very unique characters in it, very very eccentric people, like something out of a movie. Put a camera in the fucking room and everybody is just as straight faced as they'd ever be. Uh, and so, but I didn't take that into consideration. 16-year-old Mike didn't take that into consideration. And so I kind of shied away a bit from making documentary films. I enjoy watching them. I appreciate them. And maybe I may try to make another one day. But at the time, you know, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with a documentary. In fact, a really really cool story. I don't know if you know about this or not, but you know, when Kevin Smith and Scott Mosher were in film school, they were making a documentary on a trans person, and halfway through the documentary, I guess the person just started ghosting them. And so instead of finishing their set documentary, they actually turned it into a documentary about the failure of their documentary. And they called it the snowball effect. Now, maybe if I would have been smarter, maybe I would have tried to do something like that with my documentary back when I was in high school. But there's a certain level, I think, of unpredictability. Though again, I think it may also depend on the subject of your documentary as well and how you want to go about it.
Yeah, and what a lot of people kind of fail to realize, I shouldn't say fail, I should just say they don't realize, is that all documentaries kind of have a political slant towards them. And I know no one wants to hear that. It's kind of a laborious thing to recognize, but all documentaries will have either political context or political consequences. And for someone out there who's thinking, well, if I shoot a documentary on, I don't know, birds in the Himalayas or something, I don't know if there are birds in the Himalayas, but how is that political? Well, it's political in that, when you learn this is an endangered species, right, and the only thing that's going to protect them is policy change. I mean, the documentary is a very powerful political tool. And I don't know if you're ever familiar with this, but one of the greatest documentaries ever shot, and I say great in the fact that it was able to be done, not in the sense that I think the context, or excuse me, the content is great. If you've ever heard of Triumph of the Will Power, excuse me, about Adolf Hitler, where a documentary crew got up close and personal with him and followed him around. It's considered one of the most powerful and influential documentaries of all time, where you see how really beloved by the country Germany Adolf Hitler was at the time. It's just a fantastic exposition of how this person came kind of godlike, and I believe all documentaries have that power. I know that the main subject today is Kevin Smith and Clerks 3, but I don't know if you saw this, Mike, but there's a story going around the internet right now as we record this, which, by the way, I know this movie review is terribly late, but one of the reasons that is because here in the U.S., we had Hurricane Ian a few weeks ago, and that knocked out my power, so that kind of complicated us recording this episode. So apologies for my absence, my tardiness, I should say. But I didn't know this. Did you know Kevin Smith has been working on a Prince documentary for years?
I had no idea actually. I had absolutely no
Yeah,
idea.
yeah, and he started filming it, I want to say in the early 2000s, and there's some interview footage of him talking to Prince, and there's concert footage, how they do music docs. And I think it essentially got scrapped when Prince passed away. And in a recent interview, or maybe a more recent interview, I should say, Kevin Smith did say he hopes to release that footage in some context. What that looks like, we don't know. But it sounds like he's 0 for 2 when it comes to documentaries.
It can be. It can be a very, very difficult subject, and especially when you're dealing with one specific individual, you have, all these legal rights, these releases and stuff, and when that person dies, it moves on to, their their estate, and it's a whole can of worms, bro. It's a whole can of worms. Like I'm not gonna say I'll never make a documentary, but if I was to ever make one, I seriously doubt it would be about a person. Maybe about a place, maybe about an idea, maybe about a religion, maybe about a historical event or food. But when it comes to a specific person that's alive today or that's been alive in recent history, it's really dicey when it comes to the legality and the rights and stuff. And so, unfortunately, with a situation like that, like with Prince, when he dies, such a project can be left in limbo. And this can be kind of fucked up because a lot of people sink a lot of money. I'm not sure, where Kevin got his financing from. Because with a lot of projects, he does pay out of pocket. And that's the case. I feel really bad in that situation for him.
Yeah, and that's interesting that we talk about Clerks 3 today because this is the first Clerks movie to have no affiliation with Miramax, and it's only the second View Askewniverse film which has no relation at all to Harvey Weinstein. The first, obviously, being Jay and Silent Bob's reboot. But we're definitely, really for us film fans and everyone else, we're living in kind of a post-Weinstein Hollywood, a post-Weinstein film landscape. And there actually are consequences to that. And I don't mean consequences insofar as Harvey Weinstein shouldn't have been prosecuted. I mean, anyone with half a brain can tell you that he deserves to be where he is now. But Harvey Weinstein had an eye for cinema. He had a nickname. I don't know if you ever heard this, Mike. It was called Harvey Scissorhands.
I
And
have.
it, yeah, because I mean, regardless of his crimes, and that's what they were. They were crimes. He had an eye for how to edit a movie, or insofar as what should stay and what should go. Have you seen the extended original cut of Mallrats?
I haven't, unfortunately.
So I would recommend you get the recent, I think it's 2021 special Blu-ray of Mallrats, which has the cut that we've all seen, and it has the original theatrical cut, and it has an introduction with Kevin Smith stating, I don't remember if he mentions Harvey Weinstein by name. He might, because it may have been recorded before Harvey uh, got, but he admits that the version Weinstein wanted was better. Um, in short, I'll just tell you and your listeners, if you watch the Mallrats version that Kevin originally wanted, I think it's like 30 minutes before they ever arrive to the mall. There's a lot more Michael Rooker. A lot of the scenes are more extended, and a lot of the subplot points just really don't. I don't like saying going nowhere, but they kind of go nowhere. And the version which Harvey Weinstein championed was the superior version, and that's just not my opinion. That's Kevin Smith's opinion too.
I'd have to look into that actually. I always felt Mallrats. I like Mallrats. I'm not gonna say it's my favorite, but I'm also not gonna say it's as bad as a lot of people say it is. Maybe, maybe it's because of my love of Jay and Silent Bob, but also I like the characters. I felt like Brody. Brody was a very lovable character. His level of
Yeah,
comic books very relatable. But that's just kind of a bit of a mess what happened with Harvey Weinstein, man. And it's unfortunate what he did. It's really, really unfortunate what he did. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but recently
sure.
I actually found out. The band Hole, right? Hole,
Yes,
Courtney
Courtney
Love.
Love.
So she has this song, "Celebrity Skin," and apparently she was in a dispute way back in the '90s with Harvey Weinstein. Apparently she was set to play who was it? I think Cinderella, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. But apparently she didn't do what Weinstein wanted her to do, and she was one of the first to call him out on his bullshit. And apparently that song is about Weinstein and all of the what's a good adjective to use here, and all of the negative shit, all of the horrible shit that young talent gets subjected to in Hollywood. And I didn't know that as a kid. As a kid, yeah, I thought it was just about girl power and shit like that. But no, man, really, really deep, really. And Courtney Love, she isn't a saint either. I won't get into that, but I will say in that
Didn't she
situation.
have a boyfriend or something?
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. In that situation, she was in the right in that. And her versus Harvey Weinstein, definitely Courtney Love all day. I'll side with Courtney Love all day. Now, some other stuff with her life, okay, maybe not. But in that situation, yeah, I'm on Team Love. But also, what's the guy? I always forget his character's name. Not Brody, but the guy opposite of Brody, his best friend. T.S. I think his name is. T.S. But he has kind of a tragic story, real life story too. Have you ever noticed how he's one of the characters, or he's one of the actors that never appeared in any other Kevin Smith
Oh,
movie?
you're thinking of Jeremy London,
Yeah, that's
was
it.
the actor
Yeah,
who played TS. Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't know about this, but yeah, he has a very tragic backstory. Like he was forced to do I want to say it was crack or cocaine at gunpoint at a party, and after that he became addicted, and he spent a great deal of time in rehab.
I remember he was working with Dr. Drew. If you remember Dr. Drew.
I think so. I think so.
Yeah, there's a lot of Mallrats. I know we're not here to discuss Mallrats, but Mallrats is a pivotal film in the View Askewniverse because not only is this the sequel to Clerks that everybody projected to do well but didn't. I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember who they did not want? The studio did not want Jay Mewes
Yep.
to play Jay. Do you remember who they originally tried to
Seth Green,
hire
right?
for the role? Seth Green, and they even had him on set, ready to go. And I think there's an anecdote out there about Kevin Smith telling Jay, like, you see that guy over there? That's who they want to play you. So better not screw this up. And Jay, I have so much to say about Jay Mewes. First of all, Clerks 3. I know there's mixed reviews out there about Clerks 3, but I thought he actually kind of stole the show. In that we've really seen him mature not only as a character but as an actor. And even though I've never met this guy, like I was so proud of him. See, as a guy who was just kind of hanging out in Jersey, see how far he's come. And I was kind of touched seeing his performance in Clerks 3, even if he was just same old goofy Jay.
Yeah, it's really he has a very amazing story as well. If I remember correctly, in between working on the movies like Clerks, Mallrats Chasing Amy, and maybe even up to Dogma. I'm not sure if it was that late, but he was working as like a construction worker. Like he in between movies, he would work construction or he'd deliver pizza, and just kind of a hard worker, man. And also, I come from a family of addicts. I've never been a drug addict myself, but unfortunately, addiction has ravaged my family. So to see him, to go through that and to get clean and to be sober, that's mad respect, fam. Mad respect. That's not an easy battle to fight and an easy battle to win, and but he's done that. And I will say this: I personally have never met him, but one of my previous guests on the show, worked as an actor out in Hollywood for a while, and he said that he had met Jay once. He came, I think he was working at like a furniture store or something like a Costco or something of that nature. And he met Jay, and he helped Jay or Jason, I should say, carry some stuff out to his car, and Jason tipped him. And when he tipped him, he had no idea Jason tipped him. Jason just shook his hand, and he shook his hand back. And after Jason walked away, he realized he had like a $5 or $10 bill in his hand.
Wow.
So it's not just a character, but that's like really just who he is in real life.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess this is where we could start the Clerks 3 story.
Yeah.
How we kind of got here, because actually this is going to sound really strange, but for me, seeing Clerks 3 in theaters was a really personal experience. In 2016, I think I was halfway through my graduate school journey, and I took my girlfriend to see one of those Kevin Smith live shows, those one-man shows, which, by the way, for people thinking he just shows up, tells a few jokes, and gets off the stage, I don't know if you know this, Mike, he will do 3 shows a day while on tour.
I've heard about that, and I think
Yeah.
he was in such a situation when he had his heart attack, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's as rigorous anymore. I doubt that it is, but me and my girlfriend, it's so weird we're saying this. It's our 10-year anniversary, and the first date we ever had, we found out we both had a love for Kevin Smith, and we've bonded over that ever since. So I think for our anniversary one year, I got the tickets to this one of his one-man shows, and Jay could not have made it that night, but anyway, Clerks 3 was kind of rumored, kind of teased, like the idea was out there. Everybody was kind of wondering, like, would we get him to disclose on Clerks 3? And he didn't. Here's the thing: if you ever go to a Kevin Smith show, if you ask him one question, one show was probably 3 or 4 questions, because he'll take 30 minutes to answer one question. That's not always bad, because he's got some great stories, like the George Carlin story about Dogma. How, I don't know if you noticed this, but George Carlin in Dogma has a Band-Aid on his finger. And have you ever noticed that?
I didn't. Oh wow.
Yeah, because his wife had just died and he wasn't ready to take it off. So they compromised by having him wear a Band-Aid throughout the film.
Oh
Season how he played a cardinal.
damn. Ooh, that's heavy, but it's hard. It's hard for me to imagine George Carlin in that situation. But wow, he was such an awesome person, man. Such an awesome person.
He was, and I still think he's with us. I'll say that unfortunately we had to leave that one man show just a tad early. Like I said, I was in grad school at the time. I had a project due very early in the morning. That's the sacrifices of academia, I'm afraid. But a few years later, Clerks 3 gets announced. And then a few, I don't know, weeks maybe later, it reported that the movie is going forward without likes of Wendell Graves, played by Jeff Anderson. And then it's announced that the film's just not going forward at all. Then what was it, like a year or two later? I think maybe right after Jay and Silent Bob Reboot does okay, they announced that Jeff is back. They're going to do the film, I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, and who else do I meet other than Brian O'Halloran, who plays Dante in the View Askewniverse. And me and my girlfriend shared with him the story of us bonding over Kevin Smith films. And I really like Brian O'Halloran. I actually don't think he gets enough credit for a bit of Kevin Smith's filmography. Very personable. Asked me what do you do for a living, and at John Cusack that same day. Believe it or not, he didn't ask me that. John Cusack's a cool guy, a really cool dude, but he didn't care what Nick did for a living. And when Brian O'Halloran found out that I taught film, we talked about lighting, we talked about aesthetic, we talked about image. Brian O'Halloran's very knowledgeable about the craft. Now, is he gonna start a second career as a director or writer? Probably not, but he adores his own craft. And anyway, I had to ask him, and I apologized in advance because I'm sure I was like the millionth person to ask him. But I asked him, Clerks 3's just been announced. Like, Clerks 3 had just been announced. It's going down. He said he couldn't really tell me much. So I asked him what happened with the first one. And again, it was kind of under wraps, but I asked him about the script, which is now, anybody can Google this, but he told me he felt the first original script of Clerks 3 was way too dark. And he said he was willing to do it, but Jeff was not. It really came down to an issue of pay. And they thought for such a dark script, and that they both agreed that the pay was way too low, and the word he used was insulting. That the compensation for the project was insulting. He said they hammered it out when Kevin and Jeff sat down in a hotel room and just worked it all out. I then asked him, well, is the original script ever going to be released or anything? He said he still couldn't talk about it. I imagine there was probably a disclosure agreement he had. But I don't know if you remember this. They did a live table read of the original Clerks 3 script for charity. It was a one night only thing. I can't remember who they had fill in for Jeff Anderson. I want to say it was Kevin Smith, but I don't think it was. And they did that read there. But now that the movie has premiered, I don't know if you've seen this, Mike, but there's a interview he had with Kevin Smith had with like Screen Rant or Screen Wave, where he discussed a little bit of it. He said that in the wake of Hurricane Sandy, I think Randall discovers that the Quick Stop has been destroyed as a mental breakdown and sets up shop outside like in a parking lot somewhere. I want to say outside of like a mall or a Walmart or something. And it's a little town, this little makeshift quick stop, and becomes the mayor. Like, he essentially goes nuts. And Kevin Smith has essentially said that he's very, very thankful that that movie never got made.
I remember reading about that, about the story, the supposed story, and I want to say it involved maybe like a shooting of some sort or something of that nature. I might be misremembering, but inside of a movie theater, and yeah, it just seemed like really dark as a whole, really, really dark. And not to say that this one wasn't dark either, but it's not as dark as the original, but yeah, it seemed kind of out of character, like really, really out of character for these characters to be in such a situation. Like, you imagine, like, I could see maybe one day, like, maybe not in the main canon, but I don't know if you ever saw the animated series, Clerks, the animated series.
Yeah, I have it.
I could definitely see Dante in that canon maybe snapping and just kind of going off the deep end because of all the shit he has to put up with. But Randall, I don't know, man. I don't know. I will say though, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about Jeff Anderson not being on board originally. That's kind of been the history with a lot of the View Askew movies. Like, if you noticed, after the original Clerks, Jeff wasn't in, he wasn't in Mallrats, he wasn't in Chasing Amy, and you don't see him again until Dogma, and then it's just like one little scene. Like, granted, and Mallrats and Chasing Amy, Brian, he only has one little scene, and Well, in Chasing Amy, it's little. Maybe it's a little bit bigger in Mallrats, um, but yeah. So I always wondered about that, and so apparently there's been a history there. There's been a history of the pay, of a pay issue, and it's a bit of an interesting situation. I don't want to say, okay, well, this person's at fault or that person's at fault, but yeah, there's kind of a history there, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I was kind of surprised that Brian O'Halloran was so forward about it. He had a Q&A that night, which we wanted to make it to, but just couldn't because we had somewhere else to be. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it's just it really is no secret that that's always been the thing. Now, who's responsible for that? I don't know. I can't help but speculate since Weinstein's departure, if that's made it worse. Not again, to reiterate, not saying that Weinstein being in charge was a great thing because clearly it wasn't. But I'm just, there are consequences when things change. So I wonder if that aggravated, you know, again, like the landscape for Kevin Smith projects and everything. Oh,
Both Dr. Nick and I and myself, we wish to say, fuck Harvey Weinstein. Fuck him.
just for the record,
Just for the
yes.
record, yeah. So fuck him and fuck anybody else that chooses to use their position of power to take advantage of people. I wanted to ask. I wanted to kind of move a bit more. Like going into this movie, what were your faults on Clerks 3?
So I loved it. Loved it. I critics, unlike Clerks 1 and 2, were not terribly kind to this. Not to say that those films didn't have their naysayers, because they clearly did, but critics have been far less kind to this. Now, the state of New Jersey has loved it because it was also a good to New Jersey, especially in the wake of Hurricane Sandy and how Kevin Smith felt about that. But I thought this is going to sound kind of strange, but it was easily the weakest Clerks film. Easily. Does that mean it's a bad film? No. I thought even though it was one of the weakest View Askewniverse films, or even though definitely the weakest Clerks film, it was still in a way the perfect finale. It went out exactly how it came in, not just in story, but in the production. I don't know what version you saw, Mike, but here in the U.S., if you saw it in theaters, it had a very limited run. And he explained, he being Kevin Smith, had a short, very brief introduction. He explained that Lionsgate greenlit him for Clerks 3 when they sold enough Jay and Silent Bob Blu-rays and DVDs. So I thought, well, that's great because he had a bigger budget for movies like Mallrats and Clerks and excuse me, Strikes Back and everything like that. But to go back to where it's kind of strained again, actually breeds innovation, I would argue. Really enjoyed this film. I teared up at some parts. I was kind of surprised. The way I thought this is kind of reminding me of my own life. I mean, I've never worked in a gas station or anything like that, but we see those bigger questions that Kevin Smith has been, asking himself these last few years, that we all probably think, "Were to die tomorrow, what I've done here on Earth, would that have been enough?" I know that's probably very deep, probably just for your podcast, but I believe very firmly that's the question that he kind of confronts in this movie. And as a not only a scholar of film, but just someone who genuinely loves movies, I couldn't help but walk out of the theater asking that myself. I actually really enjoyed this film. Probably one of my favorite films I've seen all year. Warts and all, I'm not concerned about the imperfections. What about you?
Now, I remember hearing about this movie coming out. I was so stoked, man. I was like, yeah, this is going to be so awesome. 2022 has been a stellar year for stuff I like, man. So many awesome things have come out. New Beavis and Butthead.
Mm-hmm.
There's, new Aqua Teen Hunger Force. As well as my normal, usual yearly stuff like, for example, like Rick and Morty, Family Guy, South Park, that stuff.
Yeah.
But as time drew on, I can't exactly tell you why I felt like this. Maybe there was a reason, but I can't recall it at the moment. But I kind of felt like this was going to be it. Like this is going to be the last film. Um, the last film to close out the Clerks trilogy or the Clerks series or the whole View Askewniverse. Unfortunately, I did not see that opening with Kevin Smith.
Yeah.
So in my part of the world, we get English movies here in Indonesia. We do, but not every English movie comes here, and especially not a movie like most comedy movies don't tend to come here, especially a movie like Clerks or Jay and Silent Bob reboot, or hell, even the latest Jackass movie didn't even come here. So I watched off a bootleg, and the guy sitting in the movie theater holding his camera, no shame in my game, fam. Now, if I could, I would definitely support. I would definitely pay money to see that movie. I definitely believe in supporting, indie filmmakers, small filmmakers, indie game developers as well. But if I can't legally buy it, then I'm going to download it. Now, that being the case, so, I did miss that bit of an intro. Now, going into this, I knew I kind of had a bad feeling. And not about the movie being bad, but that something bad was going to happen to one of the characters. Now, I've always felt like at some point in the series, one of the characters was going to die. Now, I didn't read all of the Blunt Man and Chronic comics, but there was one issue in which, I can't remember, Jay's character, Jay's superhero persona, he dies. And so, for some reason, I always was expecting it was either going to be Jay or Silent Bob to die. And so, but going into this and finding out, oh shit, it's Randall. No, not Randall. So it's Dante. It's Dante that dies, and
Yeah, they really tease it, and they put those clues early in the film, right when they're at the hospital, and Amy Sedaris' character, I think, says, he's got high cholesterol, and you should watch that too. That was a clue.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. Now, I think out of all of Kevin Smith's movies, or at least in the View Askewniverse, out of all of those movies, this is the one with the most foreshadowing in it. What do you think?
Yeah, no doubt. You could say Jay and Silent Bob or even Dogma, but I think it's the foreshadowing's on a much grander scale in this one, easily.
One of the things that really strike me about this movie is just how meta it is and how reflective it is, and we'll get into more detail about that in a bit. But one thing that really hit me hard about this movie was just seeing how Randall reacted to surviving his heart attack. And from what I know, based on how Kevin Smith reacted after he survived his, there's a lot of parallels there. And as somebody who's come close to death myself, it's that hit me really hard. That hit me really hard. So earlier when me and Nick, we were talking about our experience in university, and I said how I used to love to party. So about a couple months before I met Nick, I was actually walking down the street one night, and I was hit by a car as a pedestrian, and I had my right leg broken in 4 places. I legit thought I was going to die. I was walking with my younger bro, and my best friend, and next thing I know, I'm dreaming. Had no idea what the hell happened to me. Now, I come to laying in the cold, wet grass of a rainy December night, looking up at the dark sky, rain just hitting me in the face, and I'm thinking, what's going on? And my best friend tells me, oh, bro, you just got hit by a car. So I'm thinking I'm about to die. I seriously am thinking I'm about to die. Now, obviously I didn't, but at the time I thought I was going to die, and it legit felt like that. And, and that stuck with me for a while. It took me a very long time to get over that. And so to see that play out in this movie and know it's based on the life of somebody I look up to, that really hit me hard, man. That really brought back a lot of memories, and I'll be honest with you. I love Kevin Smith. I love all of his work, I've seen, I should say. And and this movie may not be perfect, and I'm not going to say it is perfect. I'm not going to say it's his best movie, but I will say, out of all the movies he's made, no other film has made me reflect like this movie has, man. No other film of his has made me reflect like this movie has. And based on what you said, I feel like you have a very similar experience.
Yeah, and I think that's the point of all films. Doesn't mean you have to like it, doesn't mean the movie's perfect or you should agree with us, but if a movie makes you think, makes you question, makes you believe in the characters, but also, I guess, allows you to bring all that belief in the characters back to you, where you are in your story and journey. In my opinion, that's a good movie.
I'm still. It's going to take a bit. It's going to take a bit for me to kind of get my idea of how to rank it with the other movies. I definitely don't think it's his best, but also I won't say it's his worst either. I I'm not sure yet. I need more time. So maybe in a couple of years. And that's something else with Kevin's work. As I've gotten older, some of his movies that I didn't like so much at first have really grown on me. Like for example, Chasing Amy. When I was in high school, when I was a kid in high school or junior high, I it came off to me as a romance movie, like But as I gotten older, and as I gotten a lot of similar experiences to Ben Affleck's character in that movie, I've come to appreciate that much more. So it's now one of my I like it much more than I did in the past, and that may well be something that happens with Clerks 3. So I can't really compare it at the moment, or I don't think I can. I don't think it's fair for me to compare it at the moment, especially when I've had so much time with the other films to say. But I will say I did enjoy the movie. I definitely did, and I think it's a great movie. Not perfect, but I do think it's no.
Yeah, I think for me, some of the, I guess, flaws. I didn't think the acting was as spot on in this one. Now, I know there's probably some wise guys out there be like, well, is any of the acting in any of Kevin Smith's movies good? It's all subjective, but I thought there was some little spotty here and there, but I thought where the movie compensated was, actually, I thought the cinematography was quite good. And so was the editing. I saw that Kevin Smith edited this himself, and the editing patterns and the strategies were very similar to the first Kevin Smith film, with a couple cutaways and stuff like that. So I thought that was great. The strength, I love the costumes in this. I liked how meta it got. Um, I thought it was very, very funny when Eli was dressing up as to the different like goths and Satanists, but when he came out dressed as King Diamond, from the band Merciful Fate, with the hat and the corpse face paint and the cane, like everybody in the theater died. So if people out there just don't think that's funny, I don't know what would make you laugh. But you know, I love seeing Rosario Dawson again, coming back as Bex, and it was just nice seeing the gang together one last time. And you know what? My favorite part was the final shot of the film, where we see our characters again with Eli, with Dante and Randall, with Jay and Silent Bob, because that's really how this whole thing started. And I think that's where it should end.
I was kind of saving this question towards the end, but I guess now it might be a good chance to bring this up because of the context.
Sure.
Do you think this is the last time we're going to see these characters?
So funny because me and Steven, the director of Flat State, we were texting last week talking about it. He saw it and he likes all of Kevin Smith's films with the exception of Jay and Silent Bob's reboot. I thought his criticisms of that movie were too harsh, but to each their own. Like I said, it's all subjective. But I heard him out. He doesn't like all the cameos and stuff like that. He just believes at this point it's gotten formulaic. But that's Steven. We spar over movies, but we both. He pointed out, Jay and Silent Bob's Strike Back was supposed to be the finale. I thought Clerks 2 was definitely the finale. The way the movie ends, how could it not be the finale? And then years later we get Reboot. A few years after that we get Clerks 3. I do think, at least at the time this is being recorded, in an article, Kevin Smith did say he would never rule out a fourth Clerks film. I don't believe there are any plans for it. Personally, my opinion is this View Askewniverse, as hard as it is for me to say this, as tough as it is to let this series go, series that meant so much to me in my 20s as a young man, navigating the difficult world of work, friendship, relationships, struggling with purpose and meaning, working dead end jobs while trying to pursue something. I want this series to stay around. Like I'm selfish like that, right? I want this series, and I have no problem with people calling me a Kevin Smith fanboy. Of course I am. You know, I pursued a degree in this stuff. You know, I'm own up to what you love. It's fine. Do I think it's the end? I think it is, and I think it should be. But there's always this glimmer that maybe one day it'll come back. What about you?
First, let me say I was late coming to this party, man. I was late coming to the View Askewniverse party. I was in eighth
I
grade.
was later than you.
I was in eighth
I was later
grade
than you.
when Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back came out. Now, I think it was Clerks, the animated series, was the first thing I ever saw. I was in sixth grade, and I was like, "Oh wow, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool." I know these guys. They're Jay and Silent Bob, and I saw advertisements and stuff for Dogma and Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, but I never saw those movies. Then I saw Clerks, the animated series, and then I saw after that, Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back came to VHS. That's how old this story is, VHS, right? But anyway, so I saw that, and I was like, oh wow, that's cool. Oh, I can't wait for the next one. But then I discovered, oh, there's all these other movies with these characters that I haven't seen. So, oh, okay, let me go back and watch them. And it took years because at that time, internet wasn't as big as it is now.
Yeah.
And so tracking down each of these movies was a bit of a chore, but I was able to do that. Now, granted, I was stuck with the TV edit of Mallrats, but um, but
So if you get that special edition Blu-ray, Mike, of Mallrats, it's got three versions of the film: the director's cut, the regular cut, and it's got the TV version with all the terrible uh, dubs. So just another plug. So you know.
definitely got to check that out. But
Well,
but for the longest time, man, it felt like Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back was the end. I was in eighth grade. Well, I was in seventh grade, I think, when it first came out. When the movie came out, sixth or seventh grade. I didn't see it until eighth grade. But I was a freshman in university when Clerks 2 came out. But so for the longest time, I thought Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back was the end. And then, after, about 6 years or so, I'm not good at math. So, 5 or 6 years or so, Clerks 2 came out, and that felt like it was going to be the it, man. That felt like it was going to be the end. However, and for the longest time, it actually did. Kevin Smith was making other movies, working on other projects, and we got some small things here and there, like Jay and Silent Bob Groovy Cartoon Movie, which it's something. It's something. I mean, if for what it is, it's a fun time. Different story, different day. But then Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back reboot, or Jay and Silent Bob reboot, came out, and that was completely out of left field for me. That was completely out of left field. So I think anything is kind of possible, but I do feel like that this is it. It did have this kind of this final feel to it. Now, whether or not I feel like it's final in some form. Like I feel like I feel like maybe it's possible we could see like a Jay and Silent Bob cameo at some point.
that's what I'm thinking.
Like if you ever seen Scream 3, kind of how like they just pop up and say, "Oh, hi Gail," hi, or she's like, "Hi Jay and Silent Bob," something like that. But I don't think there's gonna be another full Jay and Silent Bob movie, or that I definitely don't think there's gonna be another Clerks movie. There, it's possible. I might be wrong, and much like yourself, I'm a huge Kevin Smith fanboy, and I'm not ashamed to admit that, man. I'm definitely not. So I hope I am wrong. Though I just with that Dante, I just don't get me wrong. I think Elias is a good character. I don't know, man. I don't know if I could see him as a replacement for Dante, man. I really don't, and I don't see, and I think retconning that ending would piss a lot of people off. I think retconning, oh, it was just a dream or some bullshit like that, or
Yeah,
I think that would piss
wouldn't
a lot
work.
of people off. And I honestly, I don't think Kevin would do that. I don't think he would. Um, But I would say, much like yourself, it did feel like goodbye in some form. Now, only time will tell what kind of form that goodbye is in, but it does feel like goodbye, and I do think it's a good end. It's a good end, I would say. Now, I do kind of wish we saw a Dogma 2, but that's a different story for a different day. Um,
Yeah, and there are other and there are other View Askewniverse projects that again, at least as of now, as of this recording, have not worked out. Like Mallrats 2, which a lot of people have wanted because Mallrats has like a cult following, and then there's been rumors of a show called like Mallbrats, like a limited series or a TV series following the kids of the Mallrats characters, what they'd be up to today. There were rumors it would be on Netflix, but I think the last I ever heard of it, Kevin Smith said he couldn't find a deal for it. And, I don't want to knock it. I'm not on the anti Harley Quinn Smith wagon. Um, has the product suffered since she's been in it? I wouldn't say it's suffered. It's just different. It's changed. That's his little girl. Gonna put her in where he can, and I actually don't criticize him for that, because I would probably do the same. You know? But that having that been said, it does feel like goodbye, and I think it's okay to finally let it go. It's you know what, for those of us who are huge Kevin Smith and View Universe fans, which by the way, when we went to college, everybody around us loved Kevin Smith. Like the group we hung out with, okay? They were big Kevin Smith fans, pretty much all of them. And to again to let this series go, it's a little sad, but I'm okay with it. And as a matter of fact, as a fan, I wonder where we'll benefit if they'll finally release like a US Universe box set for the first time. You can get all the films, Clerks all the way till Clerks 3, Blu-ray, special edition, all that stuff.
I think it would be a cool idea. I think it would be a cool idea, and also I would like to see them release like some of the older print media with it as well, because I'm not sure exactly if there exists bridge media for all the films, but I know in between certain films back in the past, there were certain comics that connected to films. Like there's Chasing Dogma that explains how Giant Jay and Silent Bob, went from where they were in Chasing Amy to how they got to where they were in Dogma, for example. So
Right.
I would like to see something like that as well. Do
I mean, and some of that stuff would be very difficult to come by. I mean, with Miramax pretty much holding the rights to the previous films, and then you have Jay and Silent Bob's reboot, and then Clerks 3, how they could kind of reconcile all that to release a you know, big compilation of all that into one media outlets. I don't know how they would do that, but anything's possible.
Yeah, there has been some issues actually. I'm in a couple Kevin Smith groups, and oftentimes people complain. It's difficult to find Dogma. Like it's difficult to find copies of Dogma out in the wild, or it's difficult to find. It's on no streaming service just because the rights are in limbo. Because apparently Weinstein still owns the rights to that. Unfortunately, now I'm not sure how he was able to get his rights for Clerks and stuff, but from Weinstein, but not Dogma. I'm not sure
Well,
how that
so
happened.
this is I wrote a paper on this in graduate school, not necessarily on Clerks, but Clerks was part of the story. Kevin Smith, as you know, funded that film himself with, maxing out his credit cards. We all know that story. But for a movie to be successful, it's not always about who makes it or even who's in it. It's about how is it going to get out into the world, which is just a way of saying distribution. If you want your movie to be visible, you have to have distribution. Now, when you shake hands with a distributor, you are signing off on a lot. Okay, so we're talking about extra funding. We're talking about maybe more talent, maybe more money for your next projects. But of course, the big thing is marketing. And where will this movie be exhibited? Okay, how many theaters is it going to play in? What countries will it play in? Are there any chains, theater chains that need some extra negotiation? What billboards is it going to go up on? What cities is it going to do well in, as opposed to cities it's not going to do well in. All of those questions, it's much easier to answer those questions if you have a big distributor. But sometimes when you have a distributor, sometimes they can take over those rights. Now, I'm not a lawyer or a corporate lawyer, so I actually don't know the complete ins and outs of that. But there's a great book, American Independence, done by Yanis Silmakis, who I believe is a Greek scholar of film, very knowledgeable, and he's got a whole book on this distribution game. And Mr. Weinstein and his company Miramax, which he ran with his brother, is in there, and they were rivals with New Line Cinema. That was Batman and the Joker. That was Mario and Bowser. Just back and forth those two. Um, and it explains the complications of the distribution game. So armchair quarterbacking here, my guess, not I have that book here, which I could probably go and give you a long-winded answer for, but based on my past research, is anytime you have a distribution deal, a lot of those rights will probably end up with a distributor.
If I remember correctly, did New Line do any of Smith's movies? I think Universal did Mallrats, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me see. I'm just gonna go to the Google machine here. I'm too lazy to get my notes. But I mean, Universal, I believe. Yeah, that was. Oh, Universal was not directly involved. Yeah, so that was Gramercy Pictures, which eventually was a joint venture with Polygram and Universal. So, but Weinstein's still in the background here. So these distribution production deals, they can get pretty hairy.
Man, it's crazy how that happens, man. It's crazy how that happens. I don't have a lot of knowledge when it comes to movies and such. In the back end, the legality of it.
Yep.
But I have heard stories about certain books, being like that. For example, one of my exes, one of her favorite books involved a certain set of characters. It just so happened that the author wrote her stories, most of her stories, for one in her series with one publisher, but apparently the publisher wasn't interested in the rest of the series. So she got a new publisher interested in the series, and so she continued to publish books. But because of the legality of it, she had to change names of all her characters and such. Now, everybody who was a fan of her work knew which character was which, but for the legal aspect of it, she had to change her, the names of her characters and such. And so I'm just kind of wondering, because
We see that.
yeah, we see
We
that.
see that in Jay and Silent Bob's reboot. Did you notice that Justin Long's character is the same character that he played in Zack and Miri Make a Porno? Um, but because of rights, if you pay attention to, I think, his nameplate or the name he gives the judge, whatever, it's just his initials. But he doesn't say uh, fully the character's name from Zack and Miri Make a Porno, but it is the same character. And actually, Kevin Smith did confirm this in a Q&A.
Oh wow! Actually, I didn't know that. So Zack and Miri,
Hmm.
I think, is the only. It's probably the only non-View Universe movie that I've seen from Kevin Smith. To be honest, well, not
Really? Oh, yeah. Have you seen Red State?
I haven't. I've been wanting to see it. I've
Oh
been wanting to see
man.
Red State, and I've been wanting to see Tusk. Red State and
Yeah.
Tusk.
I think Tusk is the only one I missed out on. I'll admit that.
Now I did own Jersey Girl. I remember I bought Jersey Girl the day it came out, but on DVD. But I never brought myself around to watch. I watched it with the commentary because it had Jay on it, and it was really interesting. But I never saw it. At least I don't think I saw it without the commentary. Um, but
I believe my grandmother loves that movie.
you know, a lot of people who don't normally like Kevin Smith's work love that movie,
Yeah.
man. Love,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's one. It's a really interesting. It's a really interesting movie, I would say, in that regards. But I think that kind of got the short end of the stick because the whole Bennifer situation that was going on at the time. Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez, if I'm not mistaken, they were an item, and certain people hated anything they were in because of that. I don't really keep up with celebrity gossip, man. Um,
It's bad for your health.
like, oh, such and such character, such and such actor, was seen at a pharmacy today buying, aspirin. What could this mean about their professional life? And I'm like, dude, give me a fucking break, man. Give these people some space. Let them live their lives.
That's the price of fame. It's the price of fame. You don't belong to yourself anymore. You belong to the public. You can't do simple stuff without people speculating. I know some people have no sympathy for the rich and famous, but let's recognize that these people don't have much of a personal life either.
That's kind of one of the reasons why, when I got into content creation, and not saying that I think I'm big or famous or that I'll ever be or anything like that, but that's one of the reasons why I decided to go with a VTuber route, man. Like, so I can be behind an avatar, and a lot of other people like that as well. That's why you never see my face in any of my videos and such, and so I can live a normal life. I don't. I mean, maybe I'll get big at some point, perhaps. If I don't, that's cool too. But if I do get big, I still want to have a normal life, and so I can hide behind a digital avatar, an animated avatar, and still live my normal day to day life. I can still go out with my family, go to the mall, go to the movies, and not get hassled. So I'm not a you know I don't think the rich and famous are above criticism. Though I think hassling
Oh,
though I
of course
definitely
not.
think hassling them just because they're rich and famous is that's a pretty shit thing to do too. That's these are people that they have lives. They should be able to enjoy their lives as well, man. I mean, we're not entitled to know every time they go take a shit or every time they pull out of their partners. Um, it's crazy, man. Whew. um, but I do think this film for many people, I don't think we're unique in this situation. I think this film felt like a goodbye for many people. It felt like a chapter being closed. No, and there's a really great '90s song. I know you're from the '90s too, and '90s were forever ago. But there was a song called "Closing Time" by Semisonic.
Semisonic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every new beginning comes from some other beginnings, and yeah. Uh, so I'm just kind of wondering what's next for Kevin Smith. Um,
I wonder that too. And I will. Just another end note here. I think a lot of people hated Jay and Silent Bob's reboot because it was fan funded, it felt cheap to them, and aesthetically, it is a cheaper looking movie. I won't lie about that. And I thought that's why I thought Clerks 3 was a much not only a better film but a huge rebound as far as quality goes. But I'm glad he toughed through that. Not only just the low funds, but criticism. Finish what he started. Now he can move on to other things. I know he's not a huge fan of doing projects that he's not, I guess, really in control of, like Cop Out and stuff like that. So he's not in love with ideas like that. But also, if you listen to people like Kevin Smith or Eli Roth, they there are reasons they takes those jobs. It's easier to take those jobs because you don't have to worry about paying your workers or your actors. The studio will take care of that. People will do that stuff for you. You don't have to spend so much time prepping. You can just show up and direct. You still have to put in hard hours, and it's still a lot of hard work, but a lot of headaches that the studio will save you from, or the distributor will save you from. And I feel like his next few projects might be for your companies or something like that. Uh, But whatever, whatever he decides, I'll watch. I'm down with it. I feel like with Kevin Smith, this is probably a bit of a hot take. It's how I feel about Star Wars. I don't believe there's a bad Star Wars movie. Now, I know some people probably want to hit me over the head for saying that, but I actually don't. I believe the worst Star Wars movie is still watchable. Um, are some better than others? Sure. Are some really flawed? Oh, easily. And I believe that about Kevin Smith's films too. But you know what? You can even think a movie is flawed, heavily flawed, or even downright bad, and still like it and still love it. And he'll pick out what you enjoy about it. And that's how I feel about Kevin's films. And I think he'll still make good quality stuff.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly, especially with that last bit, man. You know how many bad movies, like really bad movies, have cult followings, have people that legitimately enjoy them. Like I myself, I'm an enjoyer of bad movies, and even if the movie is really horrible, let's say a lot of people don't like the Human Centipede movies, and I would hands down admit this the last two movies were just bigger in scope, but they really didn't bring anything new to the table. But the first one, though, say what you will about it being gross, say what you will about it being, the acting. I think the concept was very different from most horror movies at the time. And so, even if it's not a perfect movie, I can appreciate it because of that one aspect. And then also, there's the idea that sometimes a movie can just be so bad that it's actually good, and it can kind of find a life of its own in such a regards. And even no, maybe this is not fair to bring up something like that, like with The Room, for example. But I don't think a movie has to be perfect, has to be good to be enjoyed. Now, whether it's a ironic enjoyment or a legitimate enjoyment, I think that's up for debate. But I do think any movie can be enjoyed, even if it's a horrible movie. Though I think that kind of raises a whole other dilemma. Like,
Yeah, look, I'm a huge martial arts fan. I've been doing martial arts my whole life, but I love martial arts films. By any chance, Mike, have you ever seen the Jean-Claude Van Damme, Kurt McKinney film, No Retreat, No Surrender?
I've never seen that, man.
I mean,
Not that I know of, I haven't seen that.
it's very much of its time. It's a ripoff of The Karate Kid and Rocky 4. Uh, Now, hands down, an awful movie. It's a garbage film, but gosh, it's so fun. You have Kurt McKinney who plays this teenager who likes karate. Then one day, officers from the Soviet Union show up in his dad's karate studio, and they're trying to take over every karate studio in America because that's how the Soviets would invade us. Hands down. And and Jean-Claude Van Damme is like the Soviet enforcer, and he beats up his dad. I guess they take over his studio, but they moved to I think Seattle, or right outside of Seattle, and that's where Bruce Lee is buried, there in that state, and excuse me, in Washington. And when he's had enough, he just wants somebody to train him. So the ghost of Bruce Lee comes out and trains him. And you see the boom mics visible, and the poor lighting and everything. And through his training with the ghost of Bruce Lee, he finally beats up Jean-Claude Van Damme at the end of the film. It's a preposterous film. Okay, it's just bad across the board. But I love watching that film. I've seen it several times. I've seen the international cut. I've seen the U.S. cut. I've seen the cut with commentary. I can quote it. It's a fun movie. Just because it's a garbage film doesn't mean I still can't love it or have appreciation for it or even be attached to it.
I agree. I agree. I'm just curious though. So, you seem like you know a lot about that movie. I just want to know, have you ever heard anything from Bruce Lee's family or his estate about that movie? Because I'm just kind of curious how they would have reacted to such a thing.
I have never heard an official statement on it. I will tell you this. By the time that film rolled around, I think that was 1986, Bruce Lee Exploitation, which is what we called it, had kind of come and went. I don't know if you remember this, but for those of you out there that are big martial arts movies fans or even just big Bruce Lee fans, after Bruce Lee died, there was this boom in independent and exploitation cinema where they were looking for the next Bruce Lee. And you had all these actors named Bruce Lee or Bruce Lie. So you had these movies where they were pretending to be Bruce Lee or a character previously played by Bruce Lee in another film. And these actors, their alleged names were Bruce Lee, L.E., Bruce Lee, L.I., Bruce Lee, L.E.I., right? And it's like who can be the next Bruce Lee? And I mean, there's some tasteless films out there. Films either supposed to be Bruce Lee or, a very terrible biopic of his life, one which hypothesized that he just ran away. And the movie ends with Bruce Lee, the old stick with the handkerchief tied at the end with the belongings, just running away like that. There's Game of Death 2, which is where they kill off Bruce Lee's character from the first film, Mike, and they show his funeral using footage from Bruce Lee's actual funeral.
Oh man.
Yeah, and, I mean, just there's clones of Bruce Lee, and these movies are all cheap and dirty, and I mean, Game of Death 2, I admit, is a very fun movie. Um, but Bruce Lee Exploitation was in such a high kick. I don't actually think a movie like that would bother Linda Lee or Shannon Lee or the estate or anything like that.
Yeah, that actually seems like pretty tame compared to. That actually seems pretty tame compared to actually showing footage from his actual funeral. God damn, dude! Like, who thought that was a good idea? It's kind of like, did you ever see? There was a mattress company in Texas, and it was one of the anniversaries for 9/11. They made this horrible ass commercial.
Yes.
It's like, who
Yeah.
actually sat down and thought that was a good idea and greenlit it? Like, who, you know, I can only imagine what the reaction would have been had that movie had taken place in the internet age. Like, whoa, like, I can only imagine somebody's asshole would have got ripped a new one. And
Oh. And it wasn't the only film to do that. I mean, there was another one called you've heard of Enter the Dragon, obviously. There was one called Exit the Dragon,
oh,
Enter the Tiger. And on the front cover, again, kind of same thing, right? Like Bruce Lee, I think he's like killed off or something, or we're supposed to believe he's killed off. And the cover of the film of one of the versions out there is the main character standing next to Bruce Lee's casket, and the artwork is clearly a sketch from Bruce Lee's actual open casket funeral. So, I mean, this exploitation of him goes on for years, more than 10 years, 15 years, well into the 2000s. If anything, don't know how much Shannon Lee, his daughter, has commented on Bruce Lee exploitation, but the one thing she was upset about the most was his portrayal in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which personally, it's not my dad. Maybe I would feel different. I didn't think his portrayal. I thought it was satire. I didn't think it was meant to be taken seriously. Maybe like as you've said throughout this episode, that's probably a conversation for another podcast.
yeah, yeah, I remember seeing it. I was just like, wow, that's so not like I imagined Bruce Lee. But then, I finally kind of hit me. Yeah, this is probably either based on hearsay or probably based on or just some poetic license, because that's kind of one of the things with Tarantino's movies. He likes to base his movies on some historical fact, at least some of them, like Inglorious Bastards or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But he takes them in a completely different direction. And so this is kind of how I saw that scene. I was like, wow, that's kind of weird, but okay. It's I take it with a grain of salt. Like with the whole, and in reality, the Manson family, killed those people that night. But in that movie, they survived. So I kind of like, okay, that's interesting, but it's not history. I enjoy the movie. I think it's a good movie, but it's but it's just a movie. And I did feel like that scene with Bruce Lee was a little weird, but it wasn't like off-putting or anything like that. But I would say for her to say something about that movie and not the other stuff, Again, much like yourself,
Yeah,
that's not my dad, but I was like, yeah, that's. Though I guess maybe on the other hand, I guess maybe it sounds to me like that movie's much bigger, much bigger than.
true. More eyes are on Tarantino's projects than they would be a 1986 Karate Kid Rocky 4 ripoff. I agree.
Now, I do want to bring up. I do want to ask one thing, and this has nothing to do with any of Kevin Smith's movies or anything we've talked about. But this is the idea. Have you ever seen The Producers? You know,
Uh, which versions?
the well, just the overall story. So
I've seen it.
the overall story is you can a bad musical can make can be more financially successful than maybe a good one. Now, in regards to film, do you think that's true?
I don't know. That's a good question. I've actually never thought about that. I will tell you this. It's There was a book written that I had to read for grad school. I think it was called Production Studies, and it comes from years, like 10 years of ethnographical research where they were researching. One of the studios they visited was New Line, and they talked about the success. Do you remember the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle films? Not the ones of the last 20 years. I'm talking about the New Line films from, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, number two, Secret of the Ooze, and then three, Turtles in Time from the late 80s, early 90s. You remember
I
those?
remember those. In fact, I saw the last one in the movie theater. Um,
Oh, wow, that's great. Well, their opinion was they had no idea. This is the producers, okay? I'm not the one saying this. They had no idea what made this movie successful. I mean, you could say like, there was the comic books, the video games, the action figures, all that. Yeah, sure, fine. That's part of it. But nobody in the production company anticipated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, or sorry, 1 to warrant a sequel, let alone dominating at the box office. Uh, and the idea he got greenlighting the production of the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film was his son used to play with the little figures and was a big fan. And when he asked him, "Well, son, what are those about?" and he would tell him, "Oh, yeah, they're little turtles. They live in the sewer and they got powers and they're ninjas and all this." And he did his research and made it into a film and it was a hit. And prior to that, there were two other projects he was involved with that they all projected to do very well. They thought were actually very good films, and and they bombed. So I don't know. Maybe now here in the 2020s, we've got it down to more of an exact science. I don't know. At the time of this recording, I don't know if you guys get it over there in Indonesia, but there's the gay romance rom-com Pose. I thought it was going to do well myself, and I thought it was projected to do pretty well. They spent like what 31 million dollars on marketing. The movie bombed. Now, a lot of people are saying there's some social, cultural, political issues around this film. You have, if we're being frank, you have more conservative people who are gloating that the film bombed. You have more moderate people who are saying, "Hey, I'm sorry, I just didn't care to see it," and then you have people who are scratching their heads, saying, "I wonder why it didn't do well." So it's very, very difficult to determine how a film is going to be. We're talking timing, we're talking star power, we're talking distribution once again. I mean, there's just so many things. It's very difficult to predict how a movie is going to do, even with the best talent in the world.
the reason why I bring this whole thing up, is I was thinking about The Room. The Room.
Tommy Wiseau?
Tommy Wiseau considered one of the worst movies, if not the worst movie ever made, and
Hmm.
yet today it's made so much money. It's like because it's such a bad movie, so many people want to see it. And so, in my mind, I think in order for a film to be successful, either on the one hand, it has to be this is just first off, this is just me speaking from somebody outside just looking in. Either a movie has to be really, really good or really, really horrible. If it's somewhere in between, maybe it might not do too hot. But
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, please continue. Please continue.
Have you ever seen Karate Kid, the original?
I have. I have for a long
So
time.
you remember what Mr. Miyagi says to Daniel, right? Left side of the road safe, right side of the road safe. the middle squish, right? You karate do fine, you karate do no, you karate maybe get run over every time. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it because the thing about The Room, and I've showed that film class. It's one of the last films we would show when I was a graduate assistant or I was just teaching on my own time. Oh, I wanted to show them cult movies, and I still argue it's not really a popular thing for me to say in this political and cultural landscape, but I think you have to show students movies they wouldn't otherwise see. That's the point of film school. That's how they get exposed to not only new films, but new ideas. And these are younger kids. I mean, these are kids who either weren't alive or have no memory of 9/11, which is mind-boggling to me. That when you show them The Room, a movie you and I grew up with, like we heard about this movie, maybe a year or two after it was released because it was so bad and it was such at the time perceived as a failure, but it was so laughably bad and silly and over the top and just its poor quality was its uniqueness. That poor quality helped the movie. It didn't hurt the movie. A lot of bad movies out there, but if you can make a really bad movie, people are interested. They're going to invite their friends over. They're going to drink some beer. They're going to order a pizza. If they've seen it enough times, they'll do showings. They do room showings all over the U.S. We'll say the lines together. Or man, I just saw this movie. It's so terrible. You have to see it to believe it. And my freshman students, they just couldn't comprehend that, at least at the time. Hope maybe now that they're a few years removed from it, they can. But like you said, if a movie's really good, something that you can hang our hat on. If it's really bad, hey, also something we can hang our hat on. If it's kind of in the middle, we risk it being forgettable.
And that I think that mediocrity is kind of what scares me. As a content creator, it's like, man, I could be really good or I could be really horrible, and both of those will get you, will get you, remembered. But that mediocrity, whew, I will say it is kind of interesting. I've never experienced this for myself, but I have heard that, at least in some circles, The Room is like the new Rocky Horror Picture Show. So they'll have screenings of it, and there's certain rituals that go along with the movie. Um,
Yeah, everybody has to say you're tearing me apart, Lisa, or oh hi Mark at the same time.
so I want to ask. So now I've been asking a lot of questions, but I want to turn the mic over to you and ask Dr. Nick. Do you have any questions for me?
Always have questions. Um, Out of all the View Askewniverse films, you could cheat, say Kevin Smith, but it's probably going to come back to the View Askewniverse. What is your favorite?
Well, my favorite movie, oh, definitely, hands down, definitely Clerks. Definitely, the original Clerks. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the original Clerks. I would have no interest. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. So it was Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back that got me interested to making a movie. Like, wow, I can make a movie about me and my friends, because that's kind of how me and my friends in high school were. We were kind of like Jay and Silent Bob, except none of us were silent. Um, but then it hit me. Damn, to make a movie like that, you gotta have millions of dollars. Like, how could I ever do something like that? And then I saw Clerks. I read about the story behind Clerks, how it was made. I was like, okay, I got to see this movie. And when I finally saw it, I remember I finally saw that movie, and I was completely blown away by it. I was like, wow, there's this movie, and it was just made off of I think $27,000, if I'm not mistaken, 23 or $27,000, and so that's something that's more realistic. I can do this. So now, I never made a professional film before in my life, but I got interested in media production, in video production, and content creation, mostly because of that, mostly because of Clerks. Um, Now, if you want a non-Kevin Smith movie, that's a bit more harder, because I'm interested in many different genres of film. But if we're going with comedy, I would probably the best movie I've seen in recent time would probably be The Disaster Artist.
That is a great film.
And what I really like about it is that if you've seen The Room, it's definitely a plus, but you don't have to have seen The Room to enjoy it.
Oh, no, they made it very accessible. I agree.
Now, other movies like when I was a child, I loved sci-fi. I really love science fiction movies, but as I got older, I kind of grew out of it. I kind of got away from it. But when the pandemic hit, much like most people, I was stuck at home. I couldn't go out, couldn't explore. So I kind of got back into sci-fi, especially space-based science fiction. And I saw The Martian, and I think The Martian is probably my favorite science fiction movie. Partly because it's not, it's science fiction, but it's not too out there. It's more realistic. And even though it's science fiction, you have this basic man versus nature, you know, survival, story to it. It's not, not knocking Star Wars at all. Great movie, you know, an epic and masterpiece of storytelling. George Lucas is a master at telling stories, but it's not man versus hero versus villain. But it's The Martian is man versus nature just to survive, and in many regards, it's a lot like another one of my favorite movies, Into the Wild. But
Yeah, you showed me that. Showed me that in college.
maybe it's not fair to talk about that one because it's based on a true story. Maybe, but I do think Into the Wild. It's a good story. It's a very moving story, one that still sticks with me even to this day. But what about you though? If you had to choose a non Kevin Smith movie as your favorite, which movie do you think is your favorite?
I'll cheat by starting with the View Askewniverse one. I'll say that for my favorite Kevin Smith film, it's Clerks 2. And as we start winding down on the podcast here, I'm going to explain kind of why that is, but I'll get to that in a minute. Love Return of the Jedi. And I know it always goes back to Empire. As a matter of fact, in Clerks, there's the debate over which is better, Empire or Return. The worldwide consensus is and always has been that it's Empire, but I love Return. Love Return because I think it's a great ending. I'm all for, look, it's good to have a good first movie and a good second movie, but sticking the landing is important too, and that's why I love Return. I think Return is a great ending, and I watched it so many times as a kid, Mike. So many times. I've seen it and showing it to my girlfriend, and I can't wait one day to show it to my kids. I also love a 1972 Soviet film by filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky called Solaris, uh, which is the Soviet Union's response to Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. And that's an interesting film because it was the Soviet Union, white, anti-religion in general, and they give Andrei Tarkovsky, who is, I believe, Russian Orthodox, some leeway with Christian imagery and a lot of spiritual, metaphysical sentiments within the film. Beautiful film, wonderful cinematography. I turned 32 last week, and just as a small celebration, I decided to watch it again. It's a long film. It's a little shy of 3 hours. I don't mind. And honestly, I love Clerks. It as is. Clerks 2 is better, but I appreciate Clerks a lot for other reasons. And if we're going a little lighthearted, I love a goofy movie. I can quote a goofy movie. I love a goofy movie. I don't have any kids yet. One day, I plan on having kids, and that's a movie I want to show them. As far as like crap films, there's a fantastic slasher. I was probably gonna Google this and correct me, but I think there's a 1985 film called Final Exam. I think that was early 80s, maybe 81, but it's a slasher film filmed in North Carolina, and it actually had at the time extras from my college. Like, obviously I wasn't there, but this was the early 80s. Some of the extras were, I think, theater students from the school I went to for my undergraduate degree, and it's not a movie that could be made now. In fact, Mike, it's Halloween. I encourage you watch that movie. It's just silly, over the top, just wacky slasher stuff. Funny without trying to be funny. There's one scene. If I tell you, it would kind of ruin it, but one scene makes it to where that film could not be shot today. I
Oh,
mean, it's just. Yeah, like you watch it and you're just like, oh boy, you talk about not aging well. But it's a fun movie. I've showed it so many times. Uh, to tell you and your listeners just like the gravity of this film. The opening scene is a college quarterback and his girlfriend. They're fooling around in the car. They get killed by the killer, and then it's transitions to where where the rest of the film will take place on a college campus, and two guys are talking, and one of them says like, "Well, did you hear the quarterback from State College or wherever it was got murdered?" And the guy goes, "Oh, you think we'll have a chance at beating him then?"
Oh shit. Oh shit, bro.
So high art, low art, I love it all. I love it all. And I guess to cap it off here, I love Batman '89, the Tim Burton one.
One thing I'll say, and before I close it out, and I don't know if this was legit or they were just fucking around with each other. Um, but back around, I think around 2010, 2011, there was something floating around on the internet. I forget what the context was, but Kevin Smith was joking and he said, "Oh, that about he jokingly accused he didn't seriously accuse, but he was jokingly accused Tim Burton of stealing one of his comic book ideas." And then Tim Burton is like, "Anybody who knows me knows I would never read a comic book, especially nothing written by Kevin Smith." And then Kevin Smith replies, which to me perfectly explains fucking Batman. Now I'm not sure if that was this them playing with each other because I think they are cool now at least.
Yeah.
Um, but just something I thought I'd bring up. But man, it has been a pleasure, fam. It has been a pleasure catching up with you, and I hope we can do this again, man. I actually there are a couple movies I feel like would make a good discussion. Maybe even that movie you just talked about. Actually, maybe that movie you just talked about. Um, but I'll have to watch it first and just kind of see what I'm getting myself into. Um, trying not to get canceled, man. Trying not to get canceled.
I understand. Just yeah, you'll know the scene when it comes across. Let's just leave it there. But it is worth a watch, and it is a fun movie. I like to watch it with friends. Order a pizza, laugh at it, that kind of deal. If I could indulge and maybe humor some of your listeners before we go, because we started this talking about Kevin Smith, about Clerks and Clerks 3. I actually want to share a story with you guys and your listeners because I don't know if you remember this, but the first Kevin Smith film I ever saw was Clerks 2. And actually, the reason I saw it is because it was marketed, here, at least in the United States. At the time, it was almost marketed like a teen sex comedy, like a teen sex comedy, like a sex comedy, like American Pie or Animal House, kind of like that. And I had no knowledge. I was 16 years old. I had no knowledge of who Kevin Smith was. I went to Best Buy, bought this movie blind, had never heard of Clerks, watched it, didn't really know what was going on, but I still understood the jokes. I laughed a lot, showed it to my friends, and just kind of left it there. Off to university a few years later, I meet you on a fateful misty morning, and we start spending more time together. Me and you, if yeah, I don't know if you remember this, but poker nights,
Oh
poker
yeah.
nights on Friday nights, that was a real thing, or play Mario Kart. All that. I actually was sharing one of our poker things the other day. I don't know if you remember this, but we were doing this guy talk of what woman would you sleep with, and someone said the chick who voiced Lamb Chop.
Oh, that was me. That was me. That was me. I remember
Okay, all right,
that.
that sounds right. But anyway, and I don't know what it was, but you showed me Into the Wild, and I think you said something like, "Have you ever seen Clerks?" Which I no, I guess I hadn't seen Clerks 2 in a while, so I was like, I think I saw the second one or whatever, and you kept pestering me, and finally, I think months in, it was during October, I caved, and we watched it. We're just blown away by this film, blown away. Never seen anything like it, and we watched a lot of movies, me and you. Um, that was the one that stuck with me. And then I know you left university, and I fell in love with the View Universe. I ended up transferring schools. And eventually watched all the View Askewniverse films, kind of like you. I had to go back. I had to watch Dogma. I had to watch oh gosh, Chasing Amy and Strikes Back and all that, and realized they were all part of one big story. And I watched them over and over and over. I shared them with my friends, and whether or not you believe me, understand either way, that is what motivated me to go into studying movies. I didn't end up graduating with a film degree. That wasn't until, I did my doctoral work, but that's what got me to where I am now. And I've always considered meeting you and having that friendship with you and us bonding over films as part of my journey and a pivotal part at most.
That means a lot, bro. That actually, man, that actually really, really means a lot. You know, for what it's worth, man, for what it's worth, I would say that if it wasn't for you, I probably never would have made that movie I made. Now, whether or not it should have actually been made is a different story. Hey, but I never would have made that if it wasn't for you, bro. I remember it was actually when we were watching Clerks. When I showed you Clerks for the first time, I remember thinking, I want to do this. I want to do this. And that night after you left, I started brainstorming. I was like, I can do this. This can be me. This can be me. And also at the time, I was inspired by The Office, which was really. I mean, I love The Office, but different story, different day. But yeah, if it wasn't for you, bro, never would have got made, man. Never really got made. I had the desire. And maybe I had some good storytelling. Maybe I didn't. But your expertise, or your experience you shared with me, your insight into the art of drama, your insight into the cinematography, actually helped out a great deal. Actually helped out a great deal.
I have a question and 2 points to make. One, do you still have a copy of that film? Don't.
Yes and no. And what I mean by that is that it's on my Facebook. It's on my Facebook, but as far as an actual copy I have, I can. I don't actually have it like on me anymore. I had it on a hard drive, and my hard drive died, unfortunately. But I do still have it, and I probably should. I probably should look into downloading it, man. I probably should. Well, actually, you know what? I take that back. I do still have a copy of it. I have a computer. I have an older computer. It's on that hard drive, but like the keyboard for that laptop is dead. So it's there, but I can't really do anything to it. Like I can actually remove the hard drive and get it, but I haven't had a chance to do that. But I do have it. And if you like it, if you like after this, I can shoot you some links to it, or I can tag you in some comments if you like.
Please send me a private version of it, or as private as you can get it, because I want to see it. It's 12 years later. I want to see it.
It's broken up into parts. That's the only
Fine.
downside of part. I tried uploading it to YouTube. Unfortunately,
Probably for the best you don't.
well, there was a time when you can upload almost anything to YouTube and get away with it, man. There was the wild west of YouTube, but now
Was.
but now the copyright system is much more strict, and so I used a lot. I made a copy. I intended to show to everybody, because it was my last couple of weeks, my last couple of days in school. I didn't have time to, search out, Creative Commons music or open source music or royalty-free music to use. So I put a lot of songs in it that I liked at the time, that I felt matched the mood or actually inspired me, with the intent of going back and, making a proper cut of it later. However, I don't know if you remember this or not. I don't know if I ever told you guys about this, what happened to it. But actually, I got pulled into the residence life office because I was
I remember
working as
that.
an RA, and pretty much.
Yeah, Dan called me that night,
I was
Mike.
like,
He was like, Mike's in the office right now.
and
I
yeah,
was like, do you need me to come down? He was like, no, stay where you are.
and I was told. It would be better for me if that didn't happen. It would be better for me if I took it down. Now I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I feel pretty confident. We filmed without a permit, so I felt pretty confident that I'm not sure exactly what they could have done legally, but I could have been in some deep shit. And probably the one thing that kind of really pissed me off about, and I wouldn't say pissed me off, but kind of hurt me, is that my boss thought I made that about her. Thought I made that one about her. My direct supervisor, when in reality, the boss character who I portrayed as an idiot was somebody entirely different. She had to go away on official business one weekend, and the guy that filled in for her, who was the boss of another building, he was a complete idiot. And so I'm like, you know what? Fuck you, dude. You're an asshole. You're a dumbass who thinks he's a smart ass. And so I did that, and I was like, okay, you know what? Fine, fine. You know what? I'll take it down. My intent was to put it back up once I got home, once I left university, because I'm like, what the fuck you can do now? I mean, yeah, you can sue me, but you know, you can sue me, but fuck, I'm actually for a certain point in time after I left university, I was homeless, so it was like, yeah, you can sue me, but you're just gonna be wasting money. Uh, but at one point, it actually got to the point where it's like I can't. I couldn't do it, and I just kept it up on my Facebook, and yeah, I ended up, my computer ended up getting damaged, and at the point in time, like I said, I was homeless, and so I never got a chance to do any more work on it. And one thing kind of led to another, and life kind of happens, man. And I kind of regret I didn't do anything with it, but also, on the other hand, now that I know a bit more about production, about film production, there are made a lot of serious mistakes with that movie, man. A lot of serious mistakes, a lot of legal mistakes. Not only did we didn't get a permit, I also didn't get I didn't get like a contract, or I didn't get like people signing, people saying, signing, okay, they agree to this. So I'm not saying, I know for sure, like none of my close friends would do this. I know for a fact. But there are some people who we worked with who I didn't know that well. Like there was this one guy. There was this one guy at one of the ending scenes who he was a friend. I don't know if you remember our friend Kevin. Our friend Kevin, kind of short, chubby guy. He was a film student, but he was a friend of Kevin, and I didn't know the guy. Even if he came up to me today, I wouldn't know him from Adam. So hypothetically speaking, if he wanted to be a dick about it, he could say, "Oh, I didn't give you I didn't give you, an agreement to, put me in this movie." And even though he did, we did have a verbal contract. I could probably argue, legally, I would have nothing to show for it. So if he wanted to be a dick about it, he could probably, do something legally against me. But you live and learn, right?
Right. That's part of the journey, though. That's the reality. You wouldn't do that again. But, no, I mean, the fact that they probably couldn't do anything about it now is what makes it even more beautiful. But that was a good time in my life. I still have that photo of the rap party, or the watch party where we all watched it, and then we all gathered in the hall, and you know, that big group photo. I still have that photo. So it's a big part of my life. I'm really grateful for that experience. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I really hope that your guests, or excuse me, as your guests, that your listeners and fans enjoyed this conversation, because it was a pleasure to have, and I mean that.
I hope so as well, fam. I hope they really enjoyed this, because actually, I'm hoping this would be. I'm hoping this will be a regular thing. I'm hoping we can do this again. Talk about more films and stuff, because this has been a pleasure for me, fam. This has been such a pleasure. Um, but we'll end it here. Is there anything you'd like to say to my fans before you go?
That's a pleasure all to meet you all. Hopefully we'll meet again. And anytime you want to talk about movies, Mike, for your fans or for zero fans, for the crickets outside, for $0 and 0 cents, even if I have to pay to do it, I'll do it. I love discussing cinema.
Does that include adult films?
Uh, Unfortunately, well, we recently rented. I don't know what was it, Backdoor Patrol 9, but not seeing 1 through 8. I was a little lost. So,
But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here, bro. Hey, stick around for a moment. I'm gonna close this out, and I'll come back to you. All right.
all right, man.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Nick, for joining us today. All right, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and waterfowls. Thank you so much for joining us as well. If you really like my channel and would like to support my content, please consider donating to my Ko-fi. For the time being, anything I receive via Ko-fi will go towards helping me to build my dream PC and towards becoming a VTuber properly. Also, special thanks to Fran, who does a wonderful job doing my art, and a special thanks to all of my friends on Twitter. I wouldn't be here without you all. And most importantly, a special thank you to all of you for watching. Please like this video if you like it. Dislike it if you dislike it. Feel free to comment below and let me know what you think. And if you like my content, please subscribe and turn your notifications on. Until next time, fam, remember, just be yourself and you'll be awesome. Peace out!